Welcome back to the Group Practice Accelerator podcast, brought to you by Polaris Healthcare Partners, where we leverage decades of healthcare and business experience to drive growth in successful group practices just like yours. If you're a healthcare entrepreneur and you're interested in building, scaling, or exiting your group practice, you found not only the industry's leading resource for business education, but a team of trusted advisors dedicated to helping you achieve and exceed your goals. In short, the team at Polaris creates clarity, confidence, and results. I'm your host, Jamie Falash, and the Group Practice Accelerator podcast is on the air. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today because I've got a special guest in the house that I'm excited to introduce. But before I do, let's take a quick poll. Raise your hand if you love managing compliance. And then keep your hand up if you can name every task, job, and to-do that must be completed and documented in your practice. Well, if your hand isn't up, then this episode is for you. Now, we're all familiar with the word compliance, and to be fair, we know it's the umbrella over a lot of moving parts in your practices. But often we find that groups begin to scale, and some of these operational pieces, the tasks and the requirements that keep practices running smoothly, well, those kind of get lost in the shuffle. And when we don't know who's managing what, or even if these critical tasks are getting done, that can be a problem. And worse yet, we hear from way too many business owners who leave compliance management to chance, meaning there's no system or standardization in place to manage what can be a tremendous headache, both organizationally and legally, if not properly tracked and handled. Well, today, I've invited a fellow entrepreneur behind the mic who is a pro, not only in the group practice industry, but he's an expert at all things practice compliance and so much more. So please help me welcome Cary Smith, the co-founder and CEO of Dundesk. Cary, we're so glad you're here. Welcome to the show.
What an awesome introduction. And holy cow, we've got some things to talk about in that list of. Wow. Thank you. That was great. Thanks, Mom. That was fantastic.
You're very welcome. I saw your hand was up because you are the expert at all of these things. So before we even get started, can you tell our listeners a little about yourself and your history in healthcare and dental, please?
Yeah, just briefly. So my brother's an oral surgeon, and as he was going through dental school and going through his training at the University of Texas, the undergrad piece, I was wanted to go to medical school as well, and did get accepted to medical school, but didn't go for a variety of reasons, mostly because I probably just wanted to be accepted and not really go. I don't know. But just hanging around my brother as he went through dental school up in Dallas, then starting this business, I started to see that doctors needed help. And my first foray was a business called Practice Secure, which we did insurance. And so I did a lot of malpractice insurance for doctors and wrote the policies. And I just started to see that people were relying on their insurance policies as a way to get out of trouble that could have been avoided through better business practices. And so for almost 20 years, I worked with my doctors to expand our services into training and education because that's the primary risk management strategy for dental practices. The more that people know, the less risk you can anticipate in your business. And that led me to having Dundesk be built a software platform because I just couldn't drive anymore. I was on the road all the time, visiting with doctors and just being in the practices. And it wasn't scalable from just a truck endurance angle and a backside angle. It was just too much. So we built this software platform to allow us to help doctors achieve success and avoid failure in their business because of the things that aren't getting done.
Well, sure. And you're one person. You can only be in so many places at so many times, right? Which is one. How do you scale that? What did that look like for you? What was that building process? And how long before you were able to kind of launch that into the industry?
Yeah. So I know this isn't a building a software program podcast per se, but it is basically like really trying to understand what the organizations are trying to accomplish and then see if there's a solution there we could bring to the table that would allow them to accomplish their goals through our technology. And the one thing I just kept seeing ubiquitously was people ask me, like, who's your competition? And the answer always is ignorance. That is the problem in business in general, is that people just don't know what to do a lot of times. And if you're a dental practice, this is my experience with dentists, is that when they hire people, they just allow them to work in their business using training that they've received other places. And so I started to see like that was a source of risk because of the people doing things that weren't appropriate for that particular office, or the doctor assumed that this individual knows what to do and they don't, or they read it on Facebook and they said, "Hey, this is what we need to do because I read it on Facebook." And that leads to unintended consequences, which for me can lead to error and lead to risk. So when we built the software, the first thing was how can we help? And so we started building it around that mantra. And then in the software development world, you always do this thing called minimally viable product and see like, is this viable for the world? And we built it. And I was lucky in that I had my insurance business. I had a couple thousand dental offices we insured. And so basically I had a built-in pipeline. When we launched the software, it was a success because I knew it was going to work because I knew they needed this thing. That got us started. And then COVID happened, and that was great because we had everyone's undivided attention for almost a whole year. It was badass. They weren't doing anything. They were just sitting around looking at the internet. So,
Well, sure. And when you've got your MVP, as you mentioned, your minimally viable product, that gives you an opportunity, and I assume it did during that time, to kind of build on those pieces. Because when people are getting their information from Facebook, people's posts, and again, assuming what they need to do, I mean, we don't have to elaborate on where that word can lead us to,
mhm.
but that overall ignorance and the risk it leads to, I mean, thank goodness you had that time and that background that you did to build something that's of value to practices. So, sounds like a great product, and I know it's used by a lot of people, so it speaks for itself. But that kind of leads me to a more global question. I mean, you and I have been in the dental space for, let's call it multiple decades. We don't want to go dating ourselves here, but it's fair to say the landscape has changed pretty dramatically over those years. And gosh, Cary, I still remember checking patients out by hand with a paper receipt that I wrote by hand on a ledger.
Did you flip the light on over the door so it was a green light? Like they have the lights over the operatory. So it was
All the
like somehow
things,
that was efficient. Yeah.
all of the ancient things. But let's fast forward to what's relevant, and that's the dental industry of today and looking ahead. From a general observation perspective, seeing as how you've been in this industry a long time, what are you seeing in the group practice or DSO space?
Interesting. Yeah. So what I'm seeing an interest in growing, right? Everyone talks about scale, this word scale.
Right.
And for me, scale comes after growth because you have to be able to run a business that it produces the results you intend it to produce at the location where you're at. And then someone attends a conference and they go, "Hey, we need to grow or we need to scale." So they start opening multiple locations. And what I see is when the DSO or group practice gets to around 5, 6, 7 locations, they've used their single location mindset to build multiple locations. So what's happened is they've multiplied their complexity of operations across their footprint and they stop growing at that point
Mhm.
because of the inefficiencies they built into the practice. And a couple of those inefficiencies, and I'm saying these things to bring light to it. I'm not saying these things to be negative to anyone. But I'm
No.
like when we use the word ignorance, right? That just is a lack of knowing. I'm not attacking anyone's person, right? I'm just saying they just don't know, right? The other one is that as these groups grow, like emerging groups, right? One, two, three, going to six, seven, eight, nine, 10, whatever it is, they usually depend on the people who've been there the longest, not the most skilled. So what that means is that you've dragged along your star hygienist or your star office manager or your star front desk person and gave them more responsibilities, but you didn't backfill their knowledge and experience on how to run a larger enterprise. So what ends up happening is that you start building inefficiency within your talent base and everybody's OJT. Like always, we're always learning because we can't see over the horizon because we don't have worldly experiences to understand like, wow, if I'm going to run a 50 location operation, right? That's a different job than being a hygienist or an office manager or front desk, right? I mean, holy, you have to understand all kinds of things about organizational dynamics and finance and all the things. So what I'm seeing is that the emerging groups kind of slow down or they just say to heck with it. We're just going to keep pushing and they keep planning more locations and their risk profile gets so big that they end up having lots and lots of legal issues that slow them down financially because now you got to go pay legal issues because you didn't have the disciplines because you kept growing and no one really knew they needed to do that. Lots of examples. I mean, I have lots of examples of this. The one example I can give you is a practice. They bought 7 new lasers, and the person who's responsible for compliance for the practice did not know that the lasers had to be registered with the state prior to use. And here we are lasering people. And the state finds out that there's 7 lasers in use that are unregistered, but they're in use. And so we have to pay a penalty 7 times over, which
Ooh,
ends up being, 7 or 8 grand per machine. Like it ends up being a lot, right? So
exactly.
that's just one example I can come up with of many where in the emerging group space, we're just growing too fast without developing the real disciplines that we can then pivot to actually scale without error. And then you guys know in the larger group space, 20 locations and higher, I mean, we're just seeing lots of consolidation. But what the result of that is that you're combining inefficiencies of multiple organizations. So you have location A and B and location 1 through 20 doing it one way, and you have the other locations doing it another way. And that's creating risk and inefficiency within your business. And that's when a DSO that has, let's say 50 locations calls us. We do an analysis and it's like, well, no one's doing it the same. And that's a missed opportunity because it's just very inefficient and on a lot of levels. And you guys know this because that's what you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've met Aiden Bradley, our fractional COO executive. And, we've had this conversation about on the podcast multiple times. You must grow the right way. So you made a really good point about multiplying mistakes. And his mission and our mission and yours as well is to grow first, grow the right way, correct all those errors, get everything in line so that when you scale, it's an impactful scale. Otherwise, all you're doing is multiplying those mistakes, as we said. So it's great to see that you've got those efficiencies built in to serve as people scale. Because my next question was going to get your insights on multi-location and how you serve those locations.
So generally speaking, how do we serve them? Well, the first step is we just talk to them and we say, hey, what do you believe is your primary issue?
Mhm.
Right. And the primary issue we hear a lot from groups that have, let's say in the mid-market range, like 20 to 80 location groups. What we hear is that, well, we have some things in place. We don't really know what they are. And then we have turnover. And so the office manager who was the lead on these things left. And so everything went with her. Now we're back to square one again. We don't really know what's happening across our enterprise. So there's just a lack of visibility. And whenever you lose visibility to a process, you can't control the process, so you can't control the result. So you get what you get. And the issue is from an executive return perspective, there are 2 things that come out of a process that's unmanaged, and that is unintended consequences and then unintended risk, right?
Right.
So when we go in, we try to help them understand like what are your key priorities. And oftentimes there's multiple, right? There's compliance, there's HR, there's human resources issues, there's onboarding employee issues. There's just these different issues. And we ask them to prioritize which one they think would be the most impactful. And almost always it comes down to how we engage our employees in the day-to-day things they do. So they're doing the things we need them to do. So when we ask them to do them, they know how to do it and they get it done. And we have visibility to that aspect of our business. So we can then go and do other cool things like get our hands wet with patients and that kind of stuff.
Sure. Well, and since you brought it up, let's talk about employee turnover. Like all industries, we're feeling that here in the healthcare space. And we've released a couple of good episodes recently on associate recruitment and retention that can be a helpful first step in resolving that. But needless to say, turnover is a constant risk in terms of executing business strategy. What do you think are some of the keys to like combating that turnover and keeping your business on track?
I didn't say this in my intro, but prior to my healthcare career, risk management healthcare thing, I actually was in recruiting and staffing for Fortune 500 companies, and
Oh,
I ran organizations like the Western U.S. Responsibility, right? So thousands of people being recruited through my organizations, and the first thing I did when I went into this new company that they hired me to run the show, so to speak, the first thing I asked him was like, "What's the problem?" He said, "Well, we can't retain people, and our population is aging out. They have a lot of older folks like near the end of their careers, And so what we did, instead of saying, okay, this is what we're going to go do to recruit people, we took a step back. I got all the leaders in play in a room, one room, and I said, okay, let's calibrate on what talent is for us. And they all had varying opinions of what talent was. Like leader A and leader B were looking for completely different people from a attitudes, behaviors, skills, and experiences angle, and values, and even values. So we got on the same page as far as what we conceive of as talent. And so we had a very clear picture. So as you're interviewing people, you're comparing someone against a model versus comparing them against Janet, who used to work there that you liked a lot. So that's in these groups. Like, I'm going to say it. I hate HR. I used to be in HR. I think because
Yeah.
of the problems we have in talent recruiting, I think HR is part of that problem, but in the way they approach recruiting and talent, I think it calls for a different type of strategy. And that is first calibrate on what talent is, and then don't compromise on who you recruit, and tell the story about how those people fit in your organization. So the answer to your question on managing retention and turnover is like, are we getting the right people into our business that support our value system and are going to be a match with us in attitudes, behaviors, and we'll teach them the skills and experiences, right? Because that can be taught. But when you fire someone, you always fire them for their attitude or behaviors. You never fire them because they can't do the job, right? Because that's usually the reason. So start with that first, I would say. Combat that piece. Do we understand what talent is in our group? And then say, okay, who meets that? Who are the role models in our group today that meet these values? And let's let them be the role models and actually allow them to interview people and teach them how to interview folks, because they're going to see themselves in folks. And from a values angle, not from any other criteria, right? So then values and attitudes and behaviors. And then once you get people in, the next step is, I hate, you've seen this, Jamie, and I may be going off track here, but this 90-day probation thing that people implement. So let me get this straight. You're going to recruit someone, and then day one, they're already in trouble. Day one, you're already under the microscope. I would prefer a 90-day, let's get you onboarded. Let's teach you the things you need to know. Let's role model for you for attitudes and behaviors. And let's ensure that we're investing as much as we can in the first 90 days to bring this person into our business and into our value set, because they probably have never been treated like that anywhere else, because they just get hired and you come in and start punching a clock, and you know what? They get offered $1 extra down the street. Guess what? It's the same job. I get paid a little bit extra. I'm going to go down there. But if you take this 90 days and you really invest in that person, like don't even put them on the floor in their first couple of weeks, like put them in with the executives, put them with leadership, really bring them along. You're going to see a dramatic increase in people aligning with what they need to do. And then the rest of it is just continual conversation and check-ins. How are you doing? How are you feeling? Here's where we see you. Here's where you're at. And what's cool is with Dundesk, you can actually address some of these things really quickly, because the things people need to do, if they're not doing them, you can address them really quickly because you have visibility to that like instantly. So that
Yeah.
just keeps someone on the track longer. So the goal isn't to keep someone forever. It's to keep them for as long as you can. And then when you have a system in place that can bring the next person up, you're not shut down and worried, because you're just like, oh, we'll get someone else to come in and we'll run the process over again and try to extend that duration of time they're with us as far as we can. But no, we're going to lose them at some point, and we have a system built in to replace them, so we're not shut down from a talent pipeline perspective.
Yeah, fair to say. And the 90-day piece, if you look at it from a lens of associates, sure, we can use that as a, do we fit with your life and vice versa? Of course. A lot of people come to us here at Polaris for associate equity and executive equity recruitment and retention. And sometimes that relationship takes a bit so we can get to know each other, right? So, not a probation period, but more about, hey, let's make sure this is a great fit before we move forward. But that's a bit different when we're talking about some of the pieces that we're discussing here today in terms of an office manager, assistants, hygienists, and the rest of the staff, that really you're putting these tasks, these to-dos, these compliance pieces in their hands. So what I love is that you're giving that visibility. And I want to touch on a couple of things that I saw here about Dundesk, if you don't mind, the document hub and signable docs, because keeping these things on track and trackable, that visibility piece that you mentioned, that's critical, along with tasking and building manuals and that type of thing that's really time consuming, but also really necessary. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those pieces that can help?
Yeah. This is going to sound really weird because I own a software company that does this, but this shouldn't be your priority.
Right.
I mean, it's like you hire people to watch Google Sheets and to focus on paperwork. And it's like this low level thing that's very manual and paper based. And it's like, for me, there's not a value exchange that's worth that. I mean, you're paying someone 50, 60, 70, 80,000 dollars a year to manage this paperwork. So I talked about like HR. The mission of HR needs to change, I think, in this regard. Dundesk automates all of these things so you know they're getting it done. I mean, you can give them a whole learning track of everything they need, all the documents they need to get for you, the employees like BLS and licensing and CE and all the documents. That's all automated in the same place. And then the day-to-day tasks that need to get done so your practices stay in compliance are all automated with videos and checklists. Like there's really not a lot of thinking other than I got to log into Dundesk and see what I need to do and watch the video and then go do it. But the issue is for me is that it's a super valuable tool because it elevates the ability for leaders to really focus on the things that matter to the employees, which is this conversation about the value of the work you do. And then also, here's how we're going to develop you so you can grow as a person versus I'm going to have resources I'm paying payroll for that are just sitting here moving paperwork around. Dundesk automates a lot so it gets done properly. And also, if someone's falling behind, you can see it almost instantly. Like, well, you can see it instantly. But the conversation really is like, okay, if we're going to move this business forward, do we need more paperwork being done? Or do we need individuals being developed and coached and engaged so we slow down turnover, we increase effectiveness, and we just change the name of how we engage our people in our business, which brings them closer to you and allows them to like support your brand in now their everyday interactions with the people that pay you, which is your patients. So
Ex- the whole
that's
purpose is dentistry.
yeah. That's why the first napkin was drawn up on this because I was just like, everybody's so like when you say compliance, right? I'm going to back up on that real quick.
Yeah.
Compliance is not OSHA and HIPAA. Okay. Compliance is our business has an objective or multiple objectives. And if we are not doing the things, all of us, top to bottom, every single day to reach that objective, we are out of compliance. Right.
Right.
And the things that we need to do include employee safety, cleanliness of our practices. That's the infection control. Make sure all of our equipment and our facilities perfect and ready to go. That's radiation safety and environmental protection and all the things that go into emergency preparedness and all that. Those are components of our activities that help us reach our goal. Right. So when folks put compliance into like, well, it's this necessary evil conversation. I'm just like, bro, this is part of your objective obtainment strategy.
Right.
It shouldn't be secondary and it shouldn't be left to, the dusty paper manual that's in the top of sterilization. It should be an active part of your business because if somebody gets hurt or the state board comes at you for a infection control issue, guess what? It's not that one location they're going to go after. If you've got 50 locations and you've been doing it wrong, likely you've got 50 locations that are deficient across the board because you didn't want to deal with compliance, right?
Yeah.
So that brings your goal back. So it slows your goal attainment down a little bit. That's my concept on compliance. And that's really where we think the software can help change this dynamic within the operations of these practices is that we have our patient management software that deals with revenue cycle management and the patient treatment and all that. But then Dundesk is this operations software that pairs with that to make sure we're doing all the things that enable the revenue cycle part of it to happen correctly without error.
Well, sure. And as an operations person myself and a big fan of SOPs and a nerd
Yeah.
behind processes, we've talked about this. It goes back to that operational piece within the very first location. Are we growing it correctly? Do we have the right tools in place? Are all of these elements being managed?
Mm.
And then we scale.
Yeah.
right? I love that you keep it super simple. And I know from our conversation that that very long to-do list and that task list that you raised your hand about at the beginning of the show because you live and breathe it, that you can assign that to people. And I think that that is extremely helpful when people know what their job is for that day. What do I have to get done? What are my priorities in addition to elevating patient care? So
Yeah.
I have these things very clearly outlined. It takes some of the stress off of employees. I think it makes for a better working environment, and that leads to higher retention.
Here's the other reason why you started Dundesk. Okay. So the error avoidance and all that operational stuff I just talked about was
Yeah.
like in there. The number one reason I think that I've seen the benefit I've seen with practices is basically this: you get to go home and everything is done. Practice ownership, when things are undone, you either know it or you feel it as an entrepreneur, as you own your business. And you take it home with you, and then you can't free your mind of the need because it's like I talked to Jill about that. It's like this bear is chasing you in the woods. You don't know where the bear is, but you have this fight or flight thing happening in your body because this bear is out there and the bear is your business, right? So
Right.
it's like, do we let the bear hunt us in the dark or do we let it we worry about it when we're at home, when we're supposed to be doing other things? Or do we dread going to work? Or does the bear actually get us and cause mental issues? Like you look at the stats, it's not very fun to be a dentist in some places, in some scenarios. The issue is that can we go hunt bears instead? Right. And so can we be purposeful in the work we do? So when we leave, we don't take work home with us. Like it's done. That's why we call it done desk, because we just want everyone to know the work is done. I can leave and now I can go live this life I want to live that dentistry's enabled me to go live.
Well, that's wonderful. And keeping it simple, like I said, big fan. And you've done that with not only the platform, but the name, of course. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So the interest in when we talk to like executives at these groups, right? They see things from a financial perspective. And this is an education thing for like leaders across any business. They see because their world is always focused on the spreadsheets and the bank account and the tax bill and the revenue cycle and all that stuff, right?
right.
They forget that it's the everyday actions of an hourly waged employee that drives everything above them as far as those results. They forget that. And I've had dentists tell me, well, I'm just going to fire her because I'll just go find someone else. And I'm just like, or I had one guy tell me, I'd rather keep my mediocre people than try to go find better folks. And I said, well, cool. You're just going to have mediocre dentistry coming out of your place, right? Because if you've identified it as mediocre, you know, what's going to happen? You know, so the mission we want to promote is that the individual task that an individual does at location number 28 on a Tuesday morning at 9 a.m., if it doesn't get done, it can cause ripple effects through your organization. And there's vast numbers. It could be talent related. It could be interpersonal with people not getting their work done. It could be conflict. It could be all these things.
Mhm.
And so why not have a discipline that's easy to implement so that person can actually do that task every single time without error across your enterprise? Wouldn't that be cool? And I think it is.
It is cool. And I'm glad that you have created this, kept it simple, and it allows people to, again, get work done and provide great dentistry, which is, again, our mission overall. So we appreciate this.
It's fun. I get a little preachy on this, as you can probably tell. I definitely get preachy on this
It's
because
okay.
the alternative is living hell, in my opinion. Dealing with a lawsuit or dealing with state board issues or dealing with talent turnover or having, let's say you bought 5 locations and 3 locations are not performing at all and you have to sell them off. Like there's a lot of really important negative things that are potentials. I mean, I'm not saying they happen all the time, but and it's like there are actions you can take now to avoid those things and not even have them be on the list anymore, which is risk management, right? You say, okay, I'm going to go, I'm these things. So there's active strategies. What's crazy about it is this happens in veterinarian, it happens in general medical, and you name the medical field. These owners, they're just buried with things to do, and they don't have the capacity or the talent around them to really think over the horizon and address these things before they become a problem. So all my owners have been over the years have become really good at reacting and risk managing as the risk pops. It's not healthy. It's not healthy to live like that, in my opinion. So sorry if I get a little preachy on this. I'm just I'm impassioned. Let's just call it that.
We like that about you, Kim. And so are we. In fact, we've done a couple of episodes recently on being proactive as versus reactive. And that can be anything from operations to retention, you name it. It all falls into those two categories and two types of people. And we can be both types at different points in our lives in different situations. So I appreciate that you can share your insights. And I know there are a lot of people listening today that can relate to that exactly because their passion lies in what they do and not the minutia that they really might struggle to manage at times. And if we can keep it aligned and simple, and we can put our trust in a system to do that and train people properly to manage it, boy, it just changes your whole lifestyle. You can live, work at work and enjoy your life.
Yeah. And I think that's where I love the work you do, just to shine light on you guys, is that sometimes you just need help to find a place to start.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's like if you're standing in the fire, you don't know where to point the fire extinguisher, right? And
Exactly.
it's just a really bad example, but I mean, it could be your business is so complex that you need clarity and advice on, okay, what levers do we need to pull first? And then I think if the levers to be pulled, the people need to know how to act under the new lever, right? Or whatever the metaphor is.
Yeah, I got you. And oftentimes, as practice owners and business owners, we're just too close to either see the problem, or alternatively, we don't want to manage the problem ourselves. We want to focus on dentistry, and we want to bring somebody in to help manage these things. And that's why we love having you as a partner, because we can bring you in as well and add you to that collaboration of solving those issues in the practice so they can get to that growth that they planned.
I like it when they say, we tried that and it didn't work, so we're not going to try anything else. I'm like, come on, bro. Yeah. Everything is an experiment. You have to continue to experiment and try to improve. And if you don't have the clarity on where you need to go, you're not going to know what strategies to select to try to achieve those objectives. So you run into this confusion of options to like, there's a product for everything, right? But it's like, how do we select the right product that drives our movement to our objectives? And I think that's where, Polaris shines, on like giving direction, North Star, on, how to select those first opportunities for maximum effect, right? That's huge, because as an entrepreneur, I've been in situations where it's like, well, hell, there's 19 options I can follow. I don't know which one to do. So let's just ride it. Let's just ride what we're doing now, right? Instead of trying.
Right. It's analysis paralysis. We've got too much in front of us. So then my favorite is the ostrich approach. If I don't see it, it's not there. I'm not going to deal with it. And that's not the way to success. Obviously, we've got to resolve these issues so we can get where we need to be. Well, thanks, Cary. I hope everyone got a lot out of today's episode. I know I did. So stick around. We'll be right back after this announcement with some additional thoughts to wrap up the show. Hey everyone, just a quick reminder that the Polaris team will be holding a free pre-conference workshop with cocktails in Philadelphia at the American Academy of Orthodontics meeting that you won't want to miss. The AAO is a worthwhile show to attend, and it runs from April 24th through the 27th. Now, our free workshop will be on Thursday the 24th at the Convention Center in room 201B. So please make sure you register in advance. I've mentioned in our prior episodes that the workshop's intended to be interactive, and it's designed to provide you with an action plan on how to get the highest value from your business. That's whether you're looking to drive growth or whether you're thinking about an exit. To reserve your seat for the free workshop, please register by visiting polarishealthcarepartners.com/AAO. Well, Cary, thank you for sharing your guidance and experience with us. I mean, it's obvious you've taken great care to create Dundesk, and it goes without saying that compliance in our businesses often needs attention, to put it gently, and you've got a powerful platform to share. How can our listeners get in touch with you to ask questions and learn more?
Yeah, sure. It's pretty easy. Kind of like Deion Sanders over there in Colorado. I'm not hard to find. Definitely donedesk.com is one way. LinkedIn, I'm on there. See the real Cary Smith, I think is what I don't know what it is, but it's there on LinkedIn. And it's just Cary@donedesk.com is the email address.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, go ahead and reach out to Cary directly for more info. And then if you'd like to learn about any of Polaris Advisory Services, or maybe there's a topic we haven't covered that you want to hear about, so please go ahead and send us an email to info@polarishealthcarepartners.com, or you can always reach us by visiting the website at polarishealthcarepartners.com. Thanks so much for being a loyal listener and subscriber. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you on the next episode of the Group Practice Accelerator Podcast.